All right, folks, Paul here with Advanced Water Systems and Duct Cleaning. We just had our second competitor come into our sting operation here to really find out what these guys are offering. Basically, this whole thing started off because we were trying to clarify the question, how much should duct cleaning cost? And the Sting House was very eye-opening for us because we're obviously in the business and we do it the right way, but we had a chance to see a couple of other methods being used and how they failed. So the Sting House, quick recap, the first guy was in there about an hour and a half. He had a long chop back hose attached to a truck mounted vacuum, and there was a brush that stuck on the end, and he just basically did the old toothbrush method. Actually, he tried pretty doggone hard to clean, but he was limited by his equipment. He really was not effective at all. So that was $200 that was effectively just wasted. The second company that came out, they were the worst. It was 28 minutes, and they used a negative air machine, and they hooked it up improperly, and it wasn't sucking really anything other than debris back into the fan. So it really didn't clean anything. All it did is it dislodged and actually destroyed a big section of several ducts with the flex duct that we use, which is an insulated duct with a plastic liner on the inside. And it's not a very tough liner. Obviously, it flexes and moves around. So you have to have equipment that is specifically designed to be able to clean and gently scrub those surfaces without tearing them all up. Like you saw in the video, there was actually a chunk of inner duct lining in the toilet. So they had blown it completely out of the duct and just blew it into the toilet. I don't even know how that happened, but we had to replace a whole bunch of ducts after those guys were done. So this was an expensive sting operation. So back to the question, how much should it cost? Well, both of those guys were around $200, $220. The second guy's in and out in less than 30 minutes, and they did a horrible job. And of course, those were we call those the Facebook guys, because that's where we ended up finding them. And they have quite a scam going on, because here in Virginia, you have to have, if you're engaged in contracting of any type, you have to be a licensed contractor. Now, to do duct cleaning, you don't have to be licensed as an HVAC person or as a plumber. You just have to have a contractor's license. Well, those guys didn't have any of that. And the reason that that's important is because when they do destroy your house, it gives you some recourse to be able to go back with the board. And there is actually some funds available here in Virginia that if somebody gets taken advantage by a licensed contractor, the state can actually help with some of those damages if the customer gets left high and dry. So these guys didn't have a license. They claimed they did, promised they did, but we couldn't never get a license number out of them. The last thing that I wanted to mention here is that during the course of making this video, we saw some other videos by some people that were trying to do a comparison between their stuff, which was negative air and air whip, which is kind of like a weed eater. It's a horrific way to do things, versus this one guy in particular bought a roto brush off Facebook. Well, it was broken. It's obvious for anybody that actually has one of these units that his unit did not function. That's probably why it was for sale. But he's using a broken piece of equipment trying to say that the roto brush doesn't work. When in fact, if you know what you're doing, you realize that your equipment is broken and you can't get an accurate gauge of that style versus negative air. Pretty much they all come back to, you got to suck out all the debris, and how you clean the inside of the duct and get that debris, into the actual vacuum or suction line. That's just where all the little variations are. At Advanced Water Systems, we use the roto brush technology, which is very gentle, very effective, and thorough on cleaning, and specially designed that it does not hurt the inside liner of your ductwork. So that's important because none of this makes any sense at all if you've torn up the inside of the duct. We use cameras to be able to see what's going on inside your ducts and to make sure that they're cleaned properly, similar to how a dentist would come in and use his instruments to be able to make sure that he's seeing what he's doing. So the enamel and your gums are kind of like the liner that goes on the inside of a flex duct. To properly clean it, it takes special equipment, specially trained people to make sure that you clean it, yet you don't damage it. The the liner, once you penetrate that, you can actually destroy the duct in such a way that you have to replace the entire duct. And if you're talking about ductwork that is inside finished ceilings, finished walls, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in many cases to try to replace ductwork. But unfortunately, once you tear up that liner, now you've got exposed insulation fibers blowing into your home every day for the rest of the time that you're going to be in that house. So the goal of this whole process is to make sure that your indoor air quality is perfect inside your house. That's where you spend a lot of your time. So if you damage the liners on the inside of your ductwork, you have just ruined your indoor air quality. You can't fix that without spending thousands and thousands of dollars on repairs in many cases. So our technology that we use is very gentle. Make sure that it thoroughly cleans the inside of the duct without damaging it. We have cameras that we use during the process and after the process to make sure that everything is done properly and thoroughly cleaned. And then we finalized everything with a sanitization, which ensures that the clean and the sanitized condition that we leave you at holds up for 12 months roughly in residential applications. But don't settle for anything less than perfection when you're talking about your indoor air quality at home. So I'm going to go ahead and try and explain the problem with how they hooked up pretty simply. Now, pardon the the infant drawing that I did here, but it gets the point across. In a normal HVA central air system, you have some sort of filter section where air is being brought in. It's going to be returned from the house back into the unit through this duct. Once it gets back to your main HVAC unit, it actually goes through a coil. This little A-frame symbolizes the coil, which I'll show you in a second. But after the coil is what changes the temperature, and then it goes through a fan and gets sent out through a plenum box, and then out through the individual duct lines, which are known as supplies, which take that different treated air and blows it back into the house. So the whole thing is basically a big circle. What these guys did was they tied in right here, and the first part of that is that they're sucking out right here and taking that out to their big truck. Problem is that air is just going right through the other side of that opening, through that open where the filter grill was, getting sucked right in and going right out to the truck. So they actually were doing nothing. But if they did it halfway properly, they would have blocked this off and made all of the air come in through the main duct, which would have sucked everything through here to get back to where the supplies are. So basically the air would have been scrubbed, it would have been pulled back in, and then you see the problem because it would have brought all of this debris through the fan and through the coil. So here's the problem with the coil. That coil up there, you could see those little thin fins on that. You start dragging a whole bunch of Legos and toys and dirt and debris, you're gonna plug that thing up really quick.